One young soldier turned around and, with a mocking grin, asked Sarah, "You want to give it a try, or are you just planning on polishing the rifle again?" The rest of the group burst into laughter. They didn't take Sarah seriously. They didn't know that she could hit that target with her eyes closed. But Sarah said nothing. She smiled lightly, took her cloth, and continued to wipe down the rifles, as if their laughter didn't even exist. In the vast, quiet expanse of the military shooting range, where only the sound of gunshots and the rustling wind break the silence, one woman stood out. Her name was Sarah Hawthorne, and to most of her fellow soldiers, she was merely a quiet technician. She maintained the weapons, cleaned the rifles, and did the work that others didn't even think about. Little did they know, Sarah was more than just the person who polished their guns. She was a master marksman, a living legend who had chosen the humble path of silence, discipline, and service. It was early morning when Sarah arrived at the range. She walked with a quiet, purposeful stride, her hands holding a bag filled with the usual tools for her daily routine. The range sergeant, an older, hardened officer named Sergeant Thompson, threw her a mocking glance as he tossed her a pair of earplugs. "Just watch and stay out of the way," he said with a smirk, clearly dismissing her from any sort of participation. Sarah gave him a slight nod and quietly moved to the edge of the platform. Her eyes followed the soldiers as they prepared to shoot, each one displaying a certain level of arrogance and confidence, perhaps unaware that their form and technique left much to be desired. She sat silently, her hands resting on her lap, as she watched their every move, silently noting their mistakes and missteps. To anyone else, she might have seemed like just another invisible part of the crew. But to Sarah, each movement was a lesson. Each missed shot a chance for improvement. Minutes later, a black armored vehicle pulled up to the range, and from it stepped a figure who would change everything. General Henry Wallace, a retired military legend with a silver beard and a decorated uniform, arrived, and the air on the range shifted. The soldiers paused, their mouths agape at the sight of the revered commander. Wallace had earned his reputation during the Battle of Elbrin Ridge, where he led a heroic rescue mission with a survival rate of less than 4%. His presence alone made the whole range feel smaller, more focused. As he stepped onto the platform, the soldiers scrambled, eager to impress him with their shooting skills. None of them noticed that the first person General Wallace looked at was not one of the marksmen, but Sarah. His sharp eyes flicked toward her, recognizing something in her quiet demeanor, something that the others had overlooked. Sarah, however, seemed completely unfazed by his arrival. She stood as calm and composed as ever, just as she had for every day before this one. She was a technician, nothing more, and she was content to keep it that way. The soldiers around her exchanged whispers, wondering why General Wallace was looking at her. A few joked about how she was just the woman who cleaned the rifles, not the one who actually shot them. They mocked her in hushed tones, not knowing the extraordinary history that lay beneath her surface. What they didn't know was that Sarah's story went far beyond that of a simple technician. Her father, Thomas Hawthorne, wasn't just a hunter. He was a military sniper instructor, and from the time Sarah was a child, he trained her in the art of precision shooting. By the age of 10, Sarah had already learned to read wind patterns, adjust for elevation, and control her breathing better than many seasoned soldiers. Every weekend, instead of playing with toys or hanging out with friends, she was out in the mountains, learning the craft of the sniper, the art of patience, accuracy, and restraint. As Sarah grew older, she joined the military. But despite her unparalleled skill, she was never officially certified as a sniper. Military bureaucracy, with its rules and regulations, required official training records, certifications, and qualifications, all of which Sarah lacked. But Sarah never complained. She was more than willing to accept the role they gave her. A quiet, invisible support staff who kept the weapons in perfect condition. She worked tirelessly, cleaning rifles, fixing scopes, and ensuring everything was in working order for the real soldiers, those who had earned the title of marksman. Sarah watched them fail. She watched them waste ammunition on shots she could have made effortlessly. She watched them struggle with techniques her father had taught her years ago. But she said nothing. She didn't boast about her skills. She didn't ask for recognition. She just did her job. But the soldiers, many of whom were far less skilled than her, assumed her silence was a sign of weakness. They thought that because she was only a technician, she had no real talent. They couldn't have been more wrong. In the midst of all this, a challenge arose. The base organized a 1-0 shooting competition. It was the perfect opportunity to show off, to prove their worth as marksmen. But despite all their bravado, none of the soldiers could land a shot on the bull's eye. They tried again and again, wasting rounds and hoping for the best, but no one succeeded. One young soldier turned around and, with a mocking grin, asked Sarah, "You want to give it a try, or are you just planning on polishing the rifle again?" The rest of the group burst into laughter. They didn't take Sarah seriously. They didn't know that she could hit that target with her eyes closed, but Sarah said nothing. She smiled lightly, took her cloth, and continued to wipe down the rifles, as if their laughter didn't even exist. It wasn't until General Wallace spoke up that everything changed. After watching the soldiers fail, he turned to the officer in charge and said, "Before I leave, I want to see someone hit the 1-0 target. Let me choose the woman cleaning rifles. Give her a shot." The entire range went silent. No one believed it. They all thought it was absurd. The woman who cleaned the rifles. The woman who hadn't even fired a shot all day. But General Wallace's authority left no room for argument. He was a legend, and when he spoke, everyone listened. Reluctantly, the officer agreed, and Sarah stepped forward. She was offered the standard military sniper rifle, but she declined. "I'll use my own," she said softly. From her bag, she pulled out an old Remington rifle, one she had used for years. The rifle was fitted with a self-adjusting scope, a piece of equipment that she had trusted her whole life. Sarah lay down on the range, her body still and focused, just like she had done hundreds of times before in the mountains. The wind blew gently, and she adjusted the scope, settling her breath, as her fellow soldiers watched in disbelief. Then, with a dry crack, her shot rang out. The screen flickered as the bullet hit the bullseye dead center. It was perfect. A moment of stunned silence followed. Then General Wallace stood up, removed his hat, and raised his hand. "Welcome, Lieutenant Sarah Hawthorne, the woman who saved my squad at Elbrin Ridge." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The soldiers who had mocked her now stood in shock, their faces pale with realization. They had dismissed a hero. Sarah wasn't just a technician. She had been the primary sniper in one of the most dangerous rescue operations in military history. She had eliminated 17 threats at ranges exceeding 800 yards, saving 43 soldiers in the process. But after the mission, she had requested a transfer to non-combat roles, unable to cope with the psychological cost of taking lives. "Why didn't you tell us?" one of the young soldiers asked. Now filled with shame, Sarah's answer was simple. "Because past achievements don't determine present worth. I wanted to be valued for who I am now, not who I used to be." General Wallace nodded. That's exactly what made her exceptional. Her humility combined with extraordinary skill. The soldiers, now aware of their mistake, approached Sarah with a newfound respect. They asked her for lessons, for advice on how to adjust scopes, how to read the wind, how to shoot with precision. And Sarah, as always, accepted their requests gracefully. She had nothing to prove. She was there to help, to teach, and to serve. The lesson was clear. True heroism doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't boast or show off. It just exists, quietly, ready when called upon. As the soldiers learned from Sarah, they understood that marksman skills were not just about hitting a target. They were about understanding the responsibility behind the shot, the weight of every decision, and the importance of restraint. Sarah's teachings went beyond technicalities. She taught them about the psychological cost of war, the burden of every life taken, and the need for precision not just in shooting, but in everything they did. Years later, many of Sarah's students would credit her with transforming their understanding of military service. Not because she demanded recognition, but because she showed them that true strength often manifested as restraint, as the ability to stay silent when the world expects noise, and to make the right decision when others would rush in. Sarah's story wasn't just about that one perfect shot. It was about the quiet strength that lies hidden within, the heroism that doesn't seek the spotlight, and the profound impact one person can have by simply being true to who they are. And so, Sarah Hawthorne, the woman who never sought fame, the one who chose humility over accolades, became a living testament to the fact that sometimes the most important victories are the ones you choose not to fight. True marksmen protect what matters most, and Sarah was proof that excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be ready when called upon.